Hey, you guys, welcome back to another episode of Becoming Secure. I'm your host, Emily, dating and relationship coach specializing in all things attachment. And today we have an episode about why wouldn't your dismissive avoidant ex fight for you or fight for your relationship? And maybe you're not even sure if he was a dismissive avoidant. So feel free to listen through. You can see, does the shoe fit? Is this the situation? But I think this is always something that can feel so painful when you are willing to fight for things, you're willing to put in the work for the relationship, and the partner you're with is not, or the partner you were with is not and chose to leave the relationship. So, part of the inspiration behind this episode is actually a conversation that I had with a one on one attachment alchemy client recently. And she started working with me because she just got out of a long-term relationship that ended quite unexpectedly, quite suddenly. Her ex pulled away over a year and a half, almost 2 years into the relationship, and she was totally blindsided by it. And she wanted to fight for the relationship, but he didn't. And so she's wrestled with a lot of things, as I think most people would, of did this mean that he doesn't really love me or didn't really love me or didn't love me enough? She was wondering, like, if I had only done or said things differently, done the right things, could I have saved this? And she was blaming a lot of him pulling away on her need for reassurance near the end. She was doing a little bit of the kind of checking and reassurance seeking of, do you still like want to be with me? Do you still want this relationship? And a lot of those things that are anxious triggers, but are also kind of somewhat normal to come up when you're experiencing a sudden shift in the relationship. So, the truth of this and what we're going to unpack today is that it wasn't really about any of the things that she thought it was. It doesn't really have a whole lot to do with like how much he loves her and cares about her. It wasn't really about like, oh, if I had just managed myself a little bit better, then I could have controlled the outcome. That's really not true. And also, that's not something that you have to do in healthy relationships. Healthy relationships aren't going to just crumble because you were a little too anxious one day. Or, if anything, it's often sometimes a symptom of the lack of foundation of the relationship if something so minuscule can bring the ending about. So, what was the, real reason that he wouldn't fight for her? So that's what we're going to unpack today. I'm going to go through a lot of the different aspects of why a dismissive avoidant won't fight for a relationship. And it really does come back to the fact that he had a dismissive avoidant attachment style. So this is really his blueprint for relationships. And for dismissive avoidance, their blueprint for relationships is full of emotional neglect and conflict avoidance. And these are things that are wired into their nervous systems from a very, very young age. It's not just a conscious decision, it's actually pretty automatic and subconscious. And so this has a tremendous impact on how he is going to show up to the relationship, and also explains a lot of why you will often see a DA not fight for a relationship and just pull away. So, the first aspect that we are going to dive into is that dismissive avoidants struggle a lot with shame, and they often don't necessarily realize this. So, this is one facet that comes largely from the amount of emotional neglect that they experienced. The natural response of a child in an environment like that is to internalize what happens to them. That is the way that our brains make sense of things. We're not capable of conceptualizing that, our parents are overwhelmed by this or that, or that they have their own issues going on. We make it about us. And so the DA will carry stories, whether he realizes it or not, like there must be something wrong with me, I'm bad. These are things that are just under the surface and underlying a lot of the ways that they operate. So then when a partner approaches them and wants them to work on the relationship, this can bring up a lot of the shame for the DA. And then he actually has to be able to face that and feel those things in order to work on things that the relationship needs. Because what's going to happen is the automatic tendency is to interpret the feedback or needing to work on things as criticism, as, oh, there's something wrong with me. Another aspect of the dismissive avoidance attachment style is, which is also a result of the emotional neglect they experienced, is that they have a really small capacity to deal with uncomfortable emotions, to deal with conflict. And so, a big part of their survival strategy is actually to disconnect from what they are feeling because no one was either there for them emotionally, or they might have been shamed or punished or rejected for having feelings or for being emotionally vulnerable. So when their shame comes up as a partner approaches them to work on things or to fix things, their ability to sit in that discomfort and to feel that shame is actually very, very small. So this only adds to their difficulty to rise to the occasion, to do the work, to take accountability. You might see them become defensive or dismissive of what's going on in the relationship because they're trying to kind of get away from the conflict. They're like, this is too much, I can't. And it's not because you're even necessarily asking for too much. It's just that their capacity is so small. Now, combine this with aspect number three that I want to touch on, which is that dismissive avoidants also often have a subconscious belief. Again, they're not necessarily aware of it, but it's in their operating system that says, I'm not capable or I'm not capable of change. And so, even if you want them to fight for things, or even if they want to consciously, that subconscious belief may lead them to think, you know what, I'm not actually able to rise to the occasion, and then start to withdraw. And this is when they'll often tell you, I can't give you what you want, or they may genuinely believe that you are better off with someone else. They're not capable of being the partner that you want or need. And this is what they may genuinely think, which really goes back to that subconscious belief that they are not capable or not capable of change. There's a sort of learned helplessness that they operate in, and a lot of the dismissive avoidance experiences is feeling trapped and overwhelmed and stuck. And so that very like shut down nervous system state contributes to a lot of overwhelm. Like I can't even make like a small change here. This is too much. I don't know. And so they're going to withdraw when they experience overwhelm. Now, a dismissive avoidant, as a result of this small nervous system capacity, when they experience additional stressors in their life, that may start to take up a lot of their emotional capacity, kind of fill up their bandwidth. And so I will often hear women say that their dismissive avoidant partner pulled away when something big or overwhelming happened in his life. And so that's in part because that capacity is so small, and it's like they have all these other stressors coming in. And another part of this is that they don't actually know how to co-regulate. It's not something that they were able to do that was available to them or safe for them to do growing up. So they really only learned that that they have to withdraw to kind of decompress. And so it is something that dismissive avoidance can learn as they move towards secure. It's something that is important for them to learn. But when they haven't done that work, they will decompress with space. That's how they kind of begin to feel okay again. And often they'll actually feel that relationships drain their capacity because they don't know how to co-regulate with a partner. And relationships could be something that energizes them or alleviates the weight of some of what they're going through, but they often aren't necessarily bringing or communicating their needs to the relationship. They're not really capable of managing their triggers very well, and their only way to do that is to withdraw. So if they're like a pot waiting to boil, because they're kind of having to stay, they can only stay in connection for so long if they're not managing or not aware of the triggers and not communicating those things. It's like, okay, once they hit their limit, they have to kind of pull away, take some space before they can, re-enter the connection or spend time with their partner again. And this brings us to aspect number four, which is pretty big. And this is the expectations, the subconscious expectations that a dismissive avoidant has for relationships. And some of these may surprise you, and it may seem like, oh my gosh, the dismissive avoidant is just like, they're awful. But it's important to recognize that this is what was modeled for them growing up. This is based on a lot of trauma. And so it's not that they, um, you know, are just bad people. It's that they have an operating system that is drastically different from, other attachment styles, for example. And so some of their expectations might not make sense to you at all. And some of them aren't actually very healthy, or they need to be, adjusted to have healthier expectations in relationships. So one of them is that their partner should be understanding of when they need space. They should always respect that. And what can happen is if the DA experiences some sort of life event with intense overwhelm and completely pulls away, or even if it is just big things happening in the relationship, whether there's like a lot of conflict or something that you guys are really struggling to work through, and then they completely pull away to try to decompress, they may actually expect their partner to be understanding of that need for space. Except that the problem is they may do this without communicating that need, and they may not communicate what's actually going on for them internally. And they may also ask for an extreme amount of space. So I've heard examples of maybe them asking for weeks or even a month of space from their partner just to think. They just need that space, when really that's pretty unreasonable and unrealistic to actually expect that you can take that much space from a relationship. That's, a symptom of, again, the insecure attachment style. That's not something that a secure or healing partner would expect. And then when the dismissive avoidance partner tries to get some of that reassurance or to understand what's actually going on, or, maybe the partner who's probably triggered in an anxious way in that moment tries to get, they're again triggered and they're trying to get some reassurance. So they're trying to soothe through their partner. The dismissive avoidant may interpret that as, you disrespecting their boundary, or that you're needing too much, or that you're not respecting their need for space. And there's kind of an aversion to compromising on that need for space. Another part of these kind of mistaken expectations, is that DAs often think that they're with the right partner, the relationship should pretty much always feel easy and peaceful, and there really shouldn't be like big issues. There shouldn't be conflict. And this kind of leaves them looking for this like fairy tale perfect partner that actually doesn't exist. This partner who perfectly understands their need for space, who won't ask them to compromise, who they won't have any issues with, who they won't have to, work through conflict with. And so here's the big difference that kind of puts DAs in a position where they often won't fight for a relationship versus other attachment styles who might. When there is this conflict or an issue in the relationship, DAs don't necessarily think, oh, we just need to work on things like other attachment styles might. Instead, they may interpret this as, oh, I'm with the wrong person. This is the wrong person for me. This is the wrong relationship for me. And if I were with my, ideal partner, then I wouldn't have to deal with these issues or feel this shame or change or compromise, or I would never feel like I can't, meet their needs. I wouldn't feel incapable in this way. And so this also leads the dismissive avoidant to start looking for more flaws in their partner to then justify them pulling away and leaving the relationship. And this is really a protective mechanism to prevent them from getting too close to someone, from feeling too vulnerable, from feeling trapped or overwhelmed, or all the various triggers that a DA has. So when a DA won't fight for you, it can be incredibly painful. but it's not about, how much love there was or them wanting you. And it's definitely not about your worth. It's not about you being, a bad partner necessarily. It's not about you actually being too much or needing too much or being too needy. It's really more about their subconscious programming, the operating system that they have, that they've been given in relationships. And it's important to know that securely attached partners are not going to do this, or partners who are working on themselves, even dismissive avoidants who are growing and working on themselves, are not going to just pull away suddenly and blindside you like this. They may pull away for shorter amounts of time, and you should see a trend over time where they're better about communicating that need for space. And they also should be working on being more vulnerable and open with you and working on that ability to co-regulate with a partner. And there are signs that you can actually learn to vet for that will tell you whether an avoidant is a healthy enough person for a relationship so that you're not blindsided by someone pulling away like this suddenly, especially if you've invested, a year or more into a relationship with someone who turns out doesn't have the emotional capacity or the foundation for a healthy relationship to begin with. And it's a pretty safe assumption that if someone pulls away in such an extreme way, as I've described in this video, that they're really not in a healthy enough place for a relationship. They need to do work on themselves. And you will benefit a lot from learning how to distinguish if someone's healthier or not. Again, you can prevent a lot of heartache just by knowing what are the signs that someone's ready and emotionally available and signs that they're not. And vetting, that is one of the things that I cover in my one-on-one program, Attachment Alchemy. We deep dive into how to identify emotional availability and spot red flags and lots of other things. But that's one thing that is super important if you want a healthy, secure relationship. And another tendency, another way that this dance sort of happens between the dismissive avoidance and whether it's anxious attachers or fearful avoidants who have been kind of pushed into their anxious side while dating the dismissive avoidant, a tendency that will keep you in dynamics like this is actually the tendency to accept less than you deserve. And especially in terms of getting your emotional needs met, because we are all subconsciously choosing partners who feel familiar on a nervous system level, on an attachment level. And if you haven't done the work to become more conscious, more aware of those patterns, you'll do this sort of blindly. And this is where you can kind of repeat and re-trigger the same wounds that are actually coming from your childhood rather than choosing partners who can help you heal some of those attachment wounds. And so this might look like choosing partners who are emotionally neglectful to how your caregiver, or similar to how your caregivers were, or they just couldn't meet your needs for you, or even that tendency to not work on themselves and show up for you the way that you wanted. You may see that repeated in relationships like this, where you wanted them to work on themselves and to fight for the relationship, and they didn't. And you might tell yourself this story too, that if you had just asked for less, or if you just communicated differently, or if you hadn't been so needy, then maybe you could have saved the relationship. But dynamics like these will require you to sort of shape shift or minimize your needs or fit yourself into a box in order to keep love. The problem is that you lose yourself in the process. And when you start to become more secure, you actually no longer internalize other people's poor behavior or their emotional neglect as, something wrong with you. And instead, you just evaluate more objectively if this is a healthy person and if they're a good fit for you. But what an anxious leaning person, whether that's an FA or an anxious preoccupied, will tend to do in these situations when they're noticing that this partner is very avoidant or pulling away or things like that, is their wounds will trigger and they'll start asking things like, do you still want me? Are you going to leave me? Seeking that reassurance and even kind of clinging on to their partner. And while it's not necessarily wrong or bad to seek reassurance, sometimes the way that it is done can trigger the avoidant partner as well, even someone who's a little bit further on their journey. So, someone who's more secure in this situation is going to regulate through their triggers that come up and then have a level conversation with their partner. Like, hey, I've noticed that you've pulled away pretty abruptly, and it's really important to me that in this relationship we have transparency and we have open communication. Is there something you need to talk about? Will you share with me what's going on for you? And the secure person then actually has an expectation that the avoidant partner will share and communicate, even if they do need a bit of time to process. The secure partner is not going to, anxiously like chase after that person. They're kind of just going to, hold them accountable in the sense that this is my standard. This is what I expect in order to be in a relationship with me. And they're not trying to control their partner. They're evaluating whether that partner is healthy enough to meet them at the level of emotional security and emotional maturity that is the standard for them in relationships. And the secure person is going to evaluate over time, is this person working on this? Are they continuing to grow? Or do they just drop off for days or weeks at a time? And then the secure partner is not going to put up with that. They're actually going to be willing to walk away and recognize that this is not someone who's capable of a healthy relationship. So, if you have recently gone through a situation like this, if you are a successful woman and you have, maybe an anxious or fearful avoidant attachment style and you experienced a blindsiding like this, I actually have a free gift for you in the show notes, which is a 15-minute training that will give you some tools to help you process this breakup, this experience. This is a little piece of a breakup program that I ran about a year ago. And so I'm giving you the first training of that program for free. And so you can find that below. And if you're ready to become secure in yourself, to attach more slowly, to catch red flags, and to attract a partner who's willing to do the work, willing to fight for you, this is the work that we do inside my one-on-one program, Attachment Alchemy. I'm currently accepting one-on-one clients for this for a little bit longer, and you can find more info for this and apply via the show notes. So all of those links are below, and I hope that this video was helpful for you. I hope that it gave you some encouragement to maybe not internalize so much of what is happening and to just give you some answers of like, why this happened. It can be so confusing when you don't understand that a dismissive avoidance attachment system and operating system is so different from your own. So I hope that this helped you a little bit more on your journey. And I look forward to working with some of you watching this in my one-on-one program or in future programs. And until then, wishing you lots of luck and love on your journey towards becoming more secure.